I stared at my phone, reading the message for the 100th time. The words hadn't changed. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but your husband's been seeing someone for months. I thought you should know. My name is Sasha, and this was how my perfect life began to unravel. I confronted Stefan that evening, my hands shaking as I held up my phone. Is there something you want to tell me? He glanced at the screen, and I watched his face transform from confusion to recognition to calculated calm. Baby, it's not what you think. Don't, my voice cracked. Just don't. I have proof, Stefan. Pictures, messages, everything. He sat down heavily on our leather couch, the one we'd picked out together last spring. Look, things haven't been great between us lately. You're always working late, focused on your startup ideas. I called my mom immediately after he left, expecting comfort, support, anything. Instead, her response felt like a second betrayal. Well, honey, what did you expect? Men have needs. Maybe if you'd been more attentive. More attentive? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, he cheated on me. These things don't happen in a vacuum, Sasha. You've been so wrapped up in your career lately. Stefan's such a good man. He provides for you. He's charming. I hung up. My best friend Margaret arrived within 30 minutes, armed with wine and fierce loyalty. Your mother said what? She paced my living room fuming. That's absolutely insane. It gets worse, I said, taking a long sip of wine. My dad called. He thinks I should work it out with Stefan. Apparently I'm being hasty and emotional. Of course you're emotional. Your husband cheated on you. The doorbell rang. It was my sister Jolie, looking concerned but distant. Mom sent me to talk some sense into you. Sense? I laughed bitterly. You mean convince me to stay with a cheater? He made a mistake, Sasha, but you're not exactly innocent here. When was the last time you made him feel appreciated? When was the last time you put your marriage before your career? I stood up, my wine glass trembling in my hand. Get out! Sasha, get out! The glass shattered against the wall, red wine streaming down like blood. All of you, my whole family, you're defending him? After what he did to me? Margaret stepped between us. I think you should leave, Jolie. After she left, I collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled wine. They're all taking his side, my own family. Then they don't deserve you, Margaret said firmly, kneeling beside me. Listen to me, Sasha. You're brilliant, strong, and capable. If they can't see that, it's their loss. The next week was a blur of lawyers, mediation attempts, and more betrayals. My family staged an intervention, all of them gathered in my parents' living room like I was some wayward teenager. Stefan's willing to work through this, my mother said, hope bright in her eyes. He loves you, sweetie. He's sorry, my father added. Everyone makes mistakes. I looked at their earnest faces, my mother, my father, my sister, all convinced they knew what was best for me, all choosing him over me. Something inside me hardened, turned to steel. I'm done, I said quietly. What do you mean, done? Jolie asked. I stood up, straightening my spine. I mean, I'm done with all of you. You want Stefan so badly? Keep him, but you lose me in the process. Don't be dramatic, my mother scoffed. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. From this moment on, don't call me, don't text me, don't try to contact me. We're finished. You can't mean that, my father said, finally looking worried. We're your family. No, I replied, walking to the door. Family doesn't do this to each other. Family stands by you when you're hurt. Family protects you. You're just people who share my DNA. I walked out of that house with nothing but my purse and my dignity. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name, my father's heavy sigh, Jolie's frustrated grunt. I didn't look back. In my car, I called Margaret. I did it. I cut them off. Are you okay? I started the engine, watching my childhood home grow smaller in the rearview mirror. No, but I will be. They think I'm nothing without Stefan? They think I'm the failure here? Just watch me prove them wrong. I pulled onto the main road, my hands steady on the wheel for the first time in days. Sometimes the end of everything is really just the beginning. And this was my beginning. my chance to show them all exactly what I was capable of. 3 months after walking out on my family, I sat across from a potential investor in a sleek downtown coffee shop, trying not to show how desperately I needed this meeting to go well. "Your business plan is solid," Fabian said, studying the document spread between us. "But why come to me? There are bigger firms that would jump at this." I took a careful sip of my coffee. "Because you have a reputation for backing underdogs, and right now that's exactly what I am." He leaned back, dark eyes studying me intently. "Tell me the truth. Why start this now? Your resume shows you were in corporate marketing for years. What changed?" "Everything changed," I admitted. "I lost my marriage, my family, my support system. But I gained clarity. This business idea? It's been in my head for years. I just needed the push to actually do it." Margaret, who'd insisted on coming for moral support, chimed in from beside me. "She's been developing this concept for ages. I've watched her refine it, perfect it." Fabian nodded slowly. "A digital marketing agency specifically for small businesses priced out of traditional agencies. It's not revolutionary, but your approach is unique." He tapped the business plan. "And your pricing structure could disrupt the market." "So?" I held my breath. "So, I'm in. But I want 30% equity and an active role in operations." Margaret squeezed my hand under the table as I replied, 25%, and you can have your active role." He grinned. "Done. Welcome to entrepreneurship, Sasha." The next few months were a blur of 18-hour days, endless coffee, and the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones. But slowly, surely, we began to build something real. "Another client signed," I announced, bursting into our small office space one morning. "That makes 10 this month." Fabian looked up from his computer, smiling. "The Miller account? They've been on the fence for weeks." "Not anymore." I showed them our results from the Thompson campaign, and they were sold. "This calls for a celebration," Margaret declared, spinning in her chair. She'd joined us as our PR director last month. "Drinks after work?" Later that evening, at our favorite bar, Fabian raised his glass. "To Sasha, who turned a setback into a comeback." "To karma," Margaret added with a wink. I froze mid-sip. "What do you mean?" "Oh, I ran into Jolie at the grocery store yesterday. Apparently, Stefan's new business venture isn't going so well. Something about investment problems?" My stomach twisted. "I don't want to know." "Yes, you do," Margaret insisted. "He's been hitting up your parents for money. They're considering remortgaging their house to help him." "That's not my problem anymore," I said firmly, but Fabian was watching me carefully. "It bothers you, though," he observed. "Of course it does. They're being idiots, but they're still my—" I stopped myself. "They made their choice." "Speaking of choices," Margaret interjected, pulling out her phone. "Look who just viewed your LinkedIn profile." I glanced at the screen and nearly choked on my drink. Stefan's face stared back at me, his profile showing he'd viewed mine multiple times in the past week. "Curious about your success?" Fabian asked. "More likely looking for investors," I muttered. He always did have a talent for spotting opportunity. "You've come a long way," Margaret said softly. "Remember that first week after everything happened? You were sleeping on my couch, barely eating. And now?" I gestured around us. "Now I have a thriving business, amazing partners, and actual freedom. I wouldn't go back if you paid me." Fabian raised an eyebrow. "Even if they apologized?" "They won't," I said confidently. "They're too proud. Besides, I don't need their approval anymore. Look at these numbers." I pulled up our monthly revenue report on my phone. "We're doing better than I ever dreamed." "To independence," Margaret toasted. "To new beginnings," Fabian added. I clinked my glass against theirs, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the alcohol. This was what success felt like, not just the numbers in our bank account, but the knowledge that I'd built something meaningful from the ashes of my old life. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, but I recognized my mother's writing style immediately. "Your father and I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call us." I showed the message to Margaret, who scowled. "Delete it." Instead, I typed out a response. "New phone, who's this?" and hit send. Petty, Fabian commented with a smile. I like it. I put my phone away, refusing to let them intrude on this moment. Let them worry about Stefan and his schemes. I had an empire to build, and I was just getting started. So, I said, pulling out my tablet. Wait until you see our projections for next quarter. 1 year into running my business, I was reviewing quarterly reports when Margaret burst into my office, face flushed with urgency. You need to see this, she said, thrusting her phone at me. It showed a local news article. Local entrepreneur under investigation for investment fraud. My stomach dropped as I saw Stefan's photo beneath the headline. That's not all, Margaret continued. Scroll down. I read further, my eyes widening. Stefan had apparently been running a sophisticated investment scheme, targeting older couples with retirement savings. The victims' names weren't listed, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who some of them might be. My phone rang. Unknown number again. Sasha? My mother's voice was thick with tears. Please don't hang up. I put the phone on speaker, gesturing for Margaret to stay. What do you want? We need your help. Your father... We're going to lose the house. Stefan... Stop. I cut her off. Let me guess. You invested with him? He had such a good plan, she whispered. He showed us the projections, the testimonials from other investors. We thought we could double our retirement savings. Margaret mouthed, idiots, from across the desk. I couldn't disagree. How much? I asked. Everything. Her voice cracked. Our savings, the house equity. He said it was guaranteed returns. Nothing's guaranteed, Mom. That's literally the first rule of investing. Please, she begged. We need $200,000 to keep the house. We can pay you back. I laughed bitterly. With what? You just said you lost everything. We're your parents, Sasha. Really? Because when I needed parents, you chose Stefan. When I needed support, you blamed me. When I needed family, you turned your backs. My voice was steady, even as my hands shook. Funny how I'm suddenly your daughter again when you need money. The door opened and Fabian walked in, raising an eyebrow at my expression. I waved him in. Sasha, please, my mother continued. Your father can't sleep. Jolie tried to help, but she's struggling too. We don't know what to do. I'll tell you what to do, I said coldly. Contact the authorities, file a police report, get a lawyer, but don't call me again. I hung up, dropping my head into my hands. Your ex? Fabian asked, setting a coffee on my desk. Apparently he scammed my entire family, I said. They invested everything with him. Karma's a witch, Margaret said, but her expression was concerned. Are you okay? I'm fine. They made their bed. I straightened up, reaching for the coffee. Let's focus on work. How's the Taylor account looking? But Fabian wasn't letting it go. You should look into what he's doing. If he scammed your family, he's probably scammed others. Not my problem. No, he agreed. But it could be an opportunity. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? Think about it. Your company specializes in digital marketing for small businesses. What if we offered free services to help his victims rebuild? The publicity would be incredible, and it would drive Stefan crazy, Margaret finished, grinning. Brilliant. My phone buzzed again, a text from Jolie. Mom's a mess. Dad's talking about bankruptcy. Please help us. Another message followed. I'm sorry for everything. You were right about him. Too little. Too late, I muttered, showing the messages to Margaret. Your sister reaching out too? Fabian asked. They must be desperate. Good, I said, but something in my chest tightened. They deserve this. They do, Margaret agreed. But maybe Fabian's right. Maybe there's a way to help his other victims while making your family realize exactly what they lost when they chose him over you. I pulled up Stefan's company website on my computer. Look at this. He's still actively recruiting investors. There's an event next week. We should go, Fabian suggested. Gather intelligence. Are you crazy? He'll recognize me immediately. Not if we do it right, Margaret said, excitement building in her voice. I have a friend who does amazing makeovers. He'll never know it's you. I stared at Stefan's smiling face on the website, remembering how that same smile had convinced my family to turn against me. Now it was apparently convincing others to hand over their life savings. Fine, I said finally. But we do this my way. No confrontations, no scenes. We gather information and we help his victims. But my family? They can figure their own way out of this mess. Agreed, Fabian said, pulling out his phone. I'll start making calls. As they left my office, I looked at Jolie's messages again. I'm sorry for everything, I read aloud, tasting the bitterness of those words. Sorry wasn't going to fix this, but maybe, just maybe, I could prevent others from making the same mistake my family did. I barely recognized myself in the hotel bathroom mirror. Margaret's friend had worked magic. My usually straight dark hair was now a wavy blonde. Colored contacts changed my brown eyes to blue, and subtle contouring makeup transformed my features just enough. Ready? Margaret adjusted her own disguise, a sleek red wig and glasses. As I'll ever be. I smoothed down my designer dress, borrowed from Fabian's sister. Remember, we're potential investors from Seattle. We entered the hotel conference room where Stefan's investment seminar was being held. The space was packed with people, mostly older couples clutching folders and notepads. My stomach churned as I imagined their life savings about to be handed over to him. There he is, Margaret whispered, nodding toward the front. Stefan looked exactly the same. Expensive suit, perfect hair, that practiced smile that had once made me feel special. He was working the room like a pro, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, touching people's arms in that familiar way that made them feel important. Ladies, he approached us, hand extended. Welcome. I don't believe we've met. Amanda Pierce, I said, using my prepared alias. My heart hammered, but my voice remained steady. This is my business partner, Rachel. Stefan Diaz, he smiled, holding my hand a moment too long. Seattle, right? I noticed you on the registration list. We're actually expanding our operations there. How fascinating, I purred, channeling every ounce of confidence I had. We're very interested in your investment structure. Well, you're in for a treat, he winked. We're offering special terms for our premium investors today. As he moved away to greet other guests, Margaret gripped my arm. You okay? Fine, but look who just walked in. My parents slipped into the back row, looking tired and drawn. Dad's suit hung loose on his frame, and Mom's hands wouldn't stop fidgeting with her purse. What are they doing here? Margaret hissed. Probably hoping to convince him to return their money, I muttered. Let's split up. You take the left side of the room, I'll take the right. Talk to people. Find out how much they've invested. The next hour was enlightening and horrifying. Stefan's presentation was slick, full of impressive graphs and testimonials. But as I circulated during the break, the stories I heard made my blood boil. He guaranteed 20% returns, one elderly man told me. Said it was completely safe. We remortgaged our house, his wife added proudly. Best decision we ever made. I escaped to the bathroom, fighting nausea. Margaret followed. It's worse than we thought, she said, checking under the stalls to ensure we were alone. He's got at least 30 people ready to invest today. And guess what? Your dad's been helping him recruit people from his old workplace. What? Apparently, Stefan promised to pay them back if they brought in new investors. Classic pyramid scheme, I growled. We need to... The bathroom door opened. My mother walked in, stopping short when she saw us. I turned quickly to the mirror, adjusting my wig, but her eyes met mine in the reflection. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then understanding dawned on her face. Sasha? Margaret stepped between us. Sorry, you must be mistaken. We're from Seattle. Mom moved closer, her voice dropping. I'd know my daughter's eyes anywhere, even with those contacts. Sasha, please. Your daughter? I turned, dropping the fake accent. Funny, I thought Stefan was your only child now. She flinched. We made a mistake. We know that now. But he's promising to make things right if you just drag more innocent people into his scheme. I cut her off. How can you still believe him? We don't have a choice. The bank's foreclosing next month. Your father's had 2 anxiety attacks. Jolie's husband left her after they lost their savings. We're desperate. You have choices, I said coldly. You're just making the wrong ones. Again. I moved to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Why are you here then? In disguise? To gather evidence, to stop him from destroying more lives. I pulled away. But not to help you. Never again to help you. Back in the conference room, Stefan was starting his closing pitch. I watched my father nodding along eagerly in the back row, probably already planning which former colleagues to call. My phone buzzed, a text from Fabian. Got everything we need from his company servers? Time to pull the trigger? I looked around the room at all the hopeful faces, at Stefan's practiced smile, at my parents' desperate expressions. Then I typed back, "Do it." Within minutes, phones around the room started buzzing. The local news story about Stefan's investigation had just been updated with new evidence we'd spent weeks gathering, including proof that he'd known exactly what he was doing when he targeted my family. The room erupted in chaos. As Stefan tried to maintain control, I slipped out with Margaret, leaving my wig and contacts in the hotel trash. Sometimes revenge isn't about what you do to people. Sometimes it's about letting them face the consequences of their own actions. The morning after the investment seminar, I arrived at my office to find Stefan waiting in the lobby. My heart jumped, but I kept my face neutral. "Nice dye job yesterday," he said, standing up. "Blonde suits you." "Security," I called out, but he raised his hands. 5 minutes, Sasha, that's all I'm asking. Why should I give you even 5 seconds? Because I can help your family recover their money. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. All of it, plus interest. I laughed. With what? The money you stole from other people? With legitimate investments. I've got deals in the pipeline. More lies? Fabian's voice cut through the lobby as he emerged from the elevator. I suggest you leave before I call the police. Stefan's charm didn't falter. The new business partner. I've heard great things about what you two have built here. He turned back to me. Remember when we used to talk about starting a company together? Looks like you did it without me. I did everything without you, I said, including learning who I really am. Your parents are going to lose their house, Sasha. Jolie's marriage is over. Don't you care? Before I could respond, Margaret burst through the front door, waving her phone. Have you seen the news? Oh, she stopped short, seeing Stefan. What news? Stefan and I asked simultaneously. She held up her phone, showing a breaking news alert. Local investment scheme investigation expands. Multiple arrests expected. The color drained from Stefan's face. 5 minutes are up, I said quietly. Security? As they escorted him out, he called back, This isn't over, Sasha. Your family needs you. Once he was gone, I slumped against the wall. He's right about one thing. It's not over. No, Fabian agreed. But it's getting there. The FBI contacted me this morning. They want to talk to you about being a witness. My phone buzzed, Jolie calling. I declined the call. You can't avoid them forever, Margaret said gently. Watch me. But an hour later, Jolie showed up at my office. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, clothes hanging loose on her frame. 2 minutes, I said, not offering her a seat. I left him, she blurted out. Rick, I mean. After we lost everything in Stefan's scheme, he changed. Started drinking, gambling what little we had left. I'm staying with friends. That's not my problem. No, she agreed, but I need you to know something. The day you confronted Stefan about cheating, I knew. I'd known for weeks. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? He told me not to say anything, said he was ending it, that it was just a mistake. I believed him because it was easier than facing the truth. She wiped her eyes. I chose the easy way, and I've regretted it every day since. Get out. Sasha, please. Get out! I screamed, sending my coffee mug flying across the room. It shattered against the wall, making us both jump. Fabian appeared in the doorway. Everything okay in here? My sister was just leaving, I said through clenched teeth. After she left, Fabian helped me clean up the broken mug. You know, he said carefully, sometimes the strongest revenge is showing people exactly what they lost. What do you mean? Your company's doing amazing. You're about to be instrumental in bringing down a major fraud operation. You've built a life they can only dream of now. He paused. Maybe that's enough. It's not about revenge anymore, I admitted. It's about trust. They broke something I can't fix. No, Margaret said from the doorway, but maybe you can build something new, something stronger. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother. We're meeting with bankruptcy lawyers tomorrow. I know we don't deserve your help, but please just talk to us. We were wrong. About everything. Delete it, Margaret advised. Instead, I typed back, "You're right, you don't deserve my help, but I'll send you the contact information for a good financial advisor. What you do with it is up to you." That's more than they deserve, Fabian said. Maybe, I agreed. But it's who I am. Not who they made me, but who I chose to be. Later that evening, as we reviewed the evidence we'd be presenting to the FBI, Fabian caught me staring at an old family photo on my phone. Missing them? Missing who they were supposed to be, I corrected. But you know what? I like who I am now better than who I was then. Good, he said, squeezing my shoulder, because that person built something amazing. I deleted the family photo and pulled up our company's latest projections instead. The past could stay where it belonged, behind me. I had a future to build, and it was looking brighter every day. The FBI interview room was colder than I expected. Agent Torres sat across from me, reviewing my statement about Stefan's investment scheme. "So he approached you directly at your office?" she asked, tapping her pen against the desk. "Yes, offered to help my family recover their losses if I'd back off." She nodded. "We've found similar patterns. He tries to leverage personal relationships to keep people quiet." She slid a folder across the table. "Take a look at this." Inside were photos of Stefan meeting with various people, including my father, at upscale restaurants, golf courses, even church gatherings. "Your father was quite active in recruiting new investors," she said carefully. "I'm aware." My voice was flat. "Is he being charged?" "That depends on how much he knew. We're interviewing him tomorrow." She leaned forward. "Ms. White, we have enough to arrest Stefan. But with your testimony about his direct attempt to silence you, we could make an even stronger case." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Another agent entered with fresh documents. "You need to see this," he told Torres. "Stefan just emptied his accounts, all of them." My stomach dropped. "He's running." "Not if we can help it." Torres was already on her phone, barking orders. I left the FBI office feeling drained. Margaret was waiting outside in her car. "Well?" she asked as I climbed in. "Stefan's trying to flee, and my dad might be facing charges." Her hand found mine. "I'm sorry, Sasha." "Don't be. They made their choices." I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from Jolie. "Let's get back to the office. I need to work." But when we arrived, Fabian was waiting with news of his own. "Stefan just called," he said. "He wants to meet. Says he has a proposition that could help everyone." "It's a trap," Margaret declared. "Obviously," I agreed. "But what if we could trap him instead?" Fabian raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" "He doesn't know how much evidence we have. If I meet with him, wear a wire?" "Absolutely not," Margaret interrupted. "It's too dangerous." "I'll call Agent Torres," I said, already dialing. "We do this properly by the book." 2 hours later, I sat in an upscale restaurant, wearing an FBI wire and trying to look calm. Stefan walked in right on time, still wearing his signature confident smile. "You look gorgeous," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Success suits you." "What do you want, Stefan?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I want to make a deal. I can return everyone's money, your parents, Jolie, all of them. But I need your help." "My help?" "Your company is doing well, very well. I need a legitimate business to process some investments through." I took a sip of water, buying time. "You want to use my company to launder money?" "I want to make things right," he insisted. "Your parents are about to lose everything. Jolie's living on someone's couch. I can fix it all. We can fix it together, just like we used to talk about." And if I say no? His smile tightened. Then I have some interesting stories to tell about your father's involvement in my investment strategy. Stories the FBI might find very interesting. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a chance to save your family. He reached across the table, touching my hand. The Sasha I married would understand that family comes first. I pulled my hand away. The Sasha you married doesn't exist anymore. You and my family killed her. Don't be dramatic. No, Stefan, you don't get to do this anymore. You don't get to manipulate me, or threaten me, or use my family against me. I stood up. We're done here. Sasha, wait. FBI agents emerged from every corner of the restaurant. Agent Torres approached our table, badge out. Stefan Diaz, you're under arrest for investment fraud, attempted witness tampering, and extortion. The color drained from his face as they cuffed him. You were wearing a wire? Sasha, please, I can explain. Save it for your lawyer, Torres said, leading him away. Outside, Margaret and Fabian were waiting with the FBI surveillance team. You did it. Margaret hugged me tight. It's over. Not quite, I said, watching as they loaded Stefan into a police car. My father's interview is tomorrow. What are you going to do? Fabian asked. My phone buzzed, another text from my mother. They're interviewing your father tomorrow. Please help us. He doesn't deserve prison. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. No, he doesn't. I'll have my lawyer contact the FBI in the morning. After everything they did, you're still helping? Margaret asked incredulously. I'm not doing it for them, I said, watching Stefan's police car drive away. I'm doing it for me, because I'm not them. I never was. The courthouse hallway was packed with Stefan's victims, all waiting to give their impact statements. I sat near the back, trying to be invisible, but whispers followed me anyway. That's his ex-wife. I heard she helped bring him down. Isn't that her family over there? My parents and Jolie sat on the opposite side of the hallway, not looking at me. Dad had aged a decade in the past few months, even though my lawyer had managed to get him immunity in exchange for testimony against Stefan. Margaret squeezed my hand. You don't have to stay for this. Yes, I do. The courtroom doors opened and we filed in. Stefan sat at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of his usual designer suits. He turned, scanning the crowd until he found me. I met his gaze steadily. One by one, people approached the podium to share their stories. Retired teachers who lost their pensions, small business owners who remortgaged their shops, elderly couples who could no longer afford their medications. Then it was my father's turn. Stefan Diaz was like a son to me, he began, voice shaking. I trusted him with my family's future. I defended him when my daughter... He paused, looking at me for the first time in months. When my daughter tried to warn us, I chose him over her, and I lost everything, not just money, but something far more valuable. My mother started crying softly. I recruited others into his scheme, Dad continued. Friends, colleagues, people who trusted me. I'll never forgive myself for that. But worse than losing our savings, our home, our dignity, I lost my daughter's trust. And that's something Stefan Diaz can never repay. The judge called my name next. I walked to the podium, my heels clicking against the floor. Your Honor, I'm not here to talk about money, I said. Stefan didn't just steal funds. He stole trust. He turned families against each other. He made parents choose him over their children. He destroyed relationships that can never be repaired. Stefan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The worst part, I continued, he's still doing it. Even after his arrest, he tried to manipulate me into helping him launder money by threatening my father. He doesn't feel remorse. He feels inconvenienced. After the other statements, the judge called a recess before sentencing. In the hallway, Jolie approached me hesitantly. That was brave, she said. It was true. I know. Listen, She twisted her hands together. I got a job offer. In Seattle, actually. A fresh start. Good for you. Mom and Dad are moving in with Aunt Sarah, she continued. They can't afford anything else right now. That's not my problem. No, but... She took a deep breath. Thank you for helping Dad avoid charges. You didn't have to do that. You're right, I didn't. The bailiff called us back in. The judge looked stern as she began her statement. Mr. Diaz, you have perpetrated not just financial fraud, but emotional terrorism against these families. Your actions were calculated, manipulative, and showed a complete disregard for human dignity. Stefan stood, straightening his jumpsuit. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 10 years. You are ordered to pay restitution to all victims, and you are barred from any financial industry work for life. As they led Stefan away, he called out, Sasha, please, just listen. Bailiff, the judge warned, and he fell silent. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered around the victims. My mother broke away from their group and approached me. We're selling everything, she said quietly. The house, my jewelry, everything, to try to pay people back. Smart. Sasha, please, can we just talk? Over coffee, maybe? I looked at her tired face, at the designer purse she still carried, probably worth enough to pay someone's restitution. No, I said. You don't need coffee. You need therapy. You need to understand why you chose him over me. You need to figure out why material things matter more to you than your own daughter. Until then, we have nothing to discuss. But we're family. Family? I laughed bitterly. Family trusts each other. Family protects each other. Family apologizes when they're wrong. You've done none of those things. Fabian appeared at my side. The car's ready. Goodbye, Mom, I said, turning away. Good luck with the move. As we drove away, I watched my family growing smaller in the rearview mirror. My mother still standing where I'd left her, my father comforting a crying Jolie, all of them looking lost. Are you okay? Margaret asked from the front seat. No, I admitted, but I will be. Sometimes the hardest part of moving forward is leaving people behind. Even family? Especially family. I turned away from the window. Now, about that expansion plan we discussed. The autumn wind whipped around me as I stood outside Aunt Sarah's small house, my finger hovering over the doorbell. Margaret waited in the car, giving me space for this moment. I'd received the letter last week, handwritten, from my father. Not asking for money or help, just 3 simple words. I understand now. The door opened before I could ring. Mom stood there, looking different. No designer clothes, no perfectly styled hair. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her gray roots showing. Sasha, she breathed, you came. I got Dad's letter. She stepped back, letting me enter. The house was small but tidy, family photos on the walls. I noticed all the ones of Stefan had been removed. Dad sat at the kitchen table, a therapy workbook open in front of him. He stood when he saw me, uncertain. You look well, he said softly. Business is good. We know, Mom said. We've been following your company's success online, that contract with the national retail chain. I didn't come to discuss business. Dad nodded. We've been in therapy, both of us, learning about narcissistic manipulation, about why we were such easy targets for Stefan. And we discovered something ugly about ourselves, Mom said, sitting down. We cared more about appearances than reality, more about status than truth, more about money than, she choked up, than our own daughter's happiness. We failed you, Dad added. Not just with Stefan, but long before that, always pushing you to be what we wanted, never seeing who you really were. I remained standing, arms crossed. Why tell me this now? Because we finally understand what we lost, Mom said. Not the house or the money or the social status. We lost you, and that's the one thing we can never replace. We're not asking for forgiveness, Dad continued. We don't deserve it. We just wanted you to know that we see it now. All of it. How strong you were, how right you were, how incredibly capable you've always been. My throat tightened. I needed you to see that years ago. We know, Mom whispered. We know. A small meow interrupted us. A scruffy orange cat wound around my legs. That's hope, Dad said with a slight smile. From the shelter where I volunteer now. Helping animals it's helping me be better. And I'm teaching art at the community center, Mom added. No pay, just giving back. I sat down finally, letting out a long breath. Jolie told me you've been making restitution payments to Stefan's victims. Every penny we can spare, Dad confirmed. It'll take years, but it's the right thing to do, Mom finished. We sat in silence for a moment, the cat purring between us. I'm getting married, I said suddenly, to Fabian, in the spring. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move to hug me or make demands. Instead, she asked quietly, Are you happy? The simple question, the one they'd never asked before, broke something inside me. Yes, I said. I am. Dad nodded, wiping his eyes. That's all we should have ever wanted for you. I stood up. I need to go, but I pulled out a business card, writing on the back. This is my personal number. Not for emergencies, not for help, just if you want to talk, sometimes. They both nodded, understanding the gift and its limitations. Outside, Margaret rolled down the window. You okay? I looked back at the house where my parents stood in the doorway, not reaching for me, not demanding anything, just watching with hope and regret mingled on their faces. They're different, I said. People can change, she replied, if they want to badly enough. Maybe. I got in the car. But trust has to be earned. And love? I thought about Fabian waiting at home, about the family Margaret and I had built at our company, about the strength I'd found in myself. Love was never the problem, I said finally. Love was always there, but love without respect, without trust, without understanding, it's not enough. As we drove away, I typed out a text. Thank you for understanding, finally. The response came quickly. Thank you for showing us how. We're proud of who you've become, even if we had nothing to do with it. I smiled slightly, putting my phone away. Sometimes the happy ending isn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. Sometimes it's about understanding your own worth, setting your own boundaries, and finding peace with the space between what was and what is. Let's go home, I told Margaret. We have a wedding to plan. And for the first time in years, the word home felt completely right.
Hi, I'm Elise. Grew up with a silver spoon, you could say, but never really cared for it. I always felt more at home helping out at the charity than sitting in some board meeting. So, when my buddy Casey invited me up to a no-frills cabin in the mountains for the weekend, I was all in. Little did I know, this trip would turn my world upside down. The cabin was rustic, no running water, electricity, and maybe on a good day. Casey's crew was a mix, people from all walks, but Tom stood out. He was a manager at some small-time company, nothing flashy, but he had this easy way about him. The first evening was a hoot. We were all huddled around the fire pit, the cold mountain air biting at our noses, when Tom started showing his chops. He'd already gathered firewood by the time I arrived, and there he was, setting up the fire like it was second nature. You ever start a fire before, Elise? He asked with a smirk. Only the figurative kind, I shot back, grinning. Everyone chuckled. Tom laughed. Well, tonight's a good night to learn the literal kind, then. As the fire crackled to life, Tom took charge of dinner. We had a bunch of random ingredients, and I swear the guy was a magician. With a couple of pans and the fire, he whipped up something that smelled like heaven. How'd you learn to cook like this? I asked, genuinely curious as I watched him stir the pot. Mom was a chef, he replied without looking up. Picked up a thing or two watching her. You cook? Only if pouring cereal counts. He chuckled, stirring the pot. Guess we won't starve this weekend. Dinner was a blast. The food was simple but delicious, and the company was even better. We all told stories, laughed, and the hours slipped by like minutes. Tom was the life of the party, but not in an over-the-top way. He just had this vibe that made you feel like you were in the right place. Later that night, as we sat by the fire, the group thinned out, heading to bed, and soon it was just Tom and I, the crackle of the fire keeping us company. So, Elise, what brings someone like you out here? Not exactly a glitzy weekend getaway, he teased. I needed a break from all the glitz, honestly. Plus, Casey promised me a good time, hard to say no to that. Tom nodded, poking the fire. Yeah, it's nice to get away from it all. No distractions, just the essentials. That's exactly it. It's refreshing, you know? Being out here, it's real in a way that fancy dinners and city lights just aren't. We talked into the night, the fire dying down to embers. It was easy, talking to Tom. He didn't care who my dad was or how much money I had. He just saw me, just Elise. After that mountain trip, things with Tom moved fast, like, super fast. It wasn't just a fling kindled by firelight and starry skies, it was real. We clicked on every level, and before I knew it, we were talking about a future together. It was wild how natural it felt. Tom popped the question on a chilly Sunday morning. We were at my place, having just finished a breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, my attempt at cooking, which was decent at best. He looked a bit nervous, which wasn't like him at all. He kept fidgeting with the salt shaker, pushing it around the table, before finally stopping and looking straight at me. Elise, I've been thinking. A lot, actually. About us. I smirked, wiping my hands on a napkin. That sounds serious. Should I be worried? He laughed, that easy laugh that always made me feel like everything was right in the world. No, no worries. Just, well, here goes nothing. And that's when he got down on one knee, right there in my not-so-spacious kitchen, with the smell of burnt toast still lingering a bit. Elise, will you marry me? It was so straightforward, no frills or dramatic gestures, just him and me, and a simple question that felt like the biggest thing in the world. I didn't even hesitate. Yes, Tom. Of course, yes. Fast forward to meeting his parents, Martha and Joe. We drove up to their house, a cozy little place with a garden out front that looked like it took more than a bit of work to keep up. Tom had told me they were simple folks, nothing fancy about them, and he wasn't kidding. Martha opened the door, and her smile was as warm as a summer day. Tommy. And you must be Elise. We've heard so much about you. She pulled me into a hug like we were long-lost friends. Inside, Joe was just as welcoming, though a bit more reserved. He shook my hand with a firm grip that matched his stern look, but his eyes twinkled a bit as he did. Good to finally meet you, Elise. Tommy's told us a lot. We sat down to dinner, and that's when the real conversation started. Martha served up a homemade lasagna that was absolutely to die for, and between bites, the chat flowed. So, Elise, Tommy says you work with a charity? That's quite noble of you, Joe commented, passing me the garlic bread. Yeah, it's something I'm passionate about. It's not about money for me, just helping where I can. I replied, trying to sound as down-to-earth as possible. Martha chimed in, her voice full of curiosity. That's wonderful, dear. It's rare to see young folks so dedicated to good causes these days. The dinner moved on to lighter topics, but as we were clearing the table, Tom's mom pulled me aside. Her tone was a mix of sincere and something else, maybe caution. Elise, we're just simple people here. Tom's happiness is what matters to us. You make him happy, right? I was taken aback a bit by the directness. Yes, Martha. Making each other happy is what we're all about. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with that answer, and patted my hand. Good, good. Just keep that boy smiling. As Tom and I left later that night, I couldn't help but feel like I'd passed some kind of test. But more than that, I felt an immense pressure lift off my shoulders. His parents weren't just okay with me, they genuinely seemed to like me. Introducing Tom to my parents was a different story. Dads always had this way of sizing people up, and moms no pushover either. They were polite, sure, but there was a stiffness in the air. Dad gave Tom the kind of look that could either warm you up or freeze you solid, depending on his mood. So, Tom, Elise tells us you manage a small team. Dad started during dinner, his voice casual, but with an edge that could cut glass. Tom handled it well, though. Yes, sir. It's a modest operation, but we get the job done. I enjoy the challenge. Mom watched quietly, her eyes sharp but not unkind. That's good to hear. Elise has always been driven to make a difference. We hope you two support each other. They made their point without making a scene. They were cautious, maybe even a bit skeptical, but they didn't object. They just wanted me to be happy, and that was enough for them to give us their blessing. So, we got married, and moved into this cozy, modern apartment downtown that Dad helped us secure. It was a big step, starting a new life together in a place that was all ours, well, sort of. But it felt right, like the beginning of something truly great. Living in our new apartment was like a dream at first. Tom and I had space to ourselves, decorating it with a mix of his taste and mine, nothing too fancy, but cozy enough for both of us. It was our little world. But soon, visits from Tom's parents, Martha and Joe, became more frequent. At first, I thought nothing of it, they were family after all. It started innocently enough. I wanted to make a good impression, so I bought a few nice things for their home, maybe a new coffee maker or some fancy kitchen gadgets. One Sunday, they came over for lunch, and I showed them the espresso machine I'd picked up for them. Martha's eyes lit up. "Oh, Elise, that's too much," she exclaimed, but her hands were all over it, checking every button and feature. Joe grinned, patting my shoulder. "You're spoiling us, Elise. What have we done to deserve this?" I laughed it off. "It's nothing, really. Just saw it and thought of you guys." That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The next time they came over, Martha pulled me aside, her voice low. "You know, Elise, our TV has been acting up. Nothing like your lovely flat screen here." I caught Tom's eye, looking for some kind of sign, but he just shrugged slightly. I didn't mind helping out, so I nodded. "Sure, I'll look into it for you." It wasn't long before I found myself buying them a new TV. It felt good to make them happy, and their thanks were always effusive, almost too much. But then, the requests started to get more specific. We were having dinner at their place when Joe brought it up. "Elise, you've been so kind with the gifts. There's actually something specific we've been needing. Our old mattress is just killing our backs." I glanced at Tom, who seemed uncomfortable, but said nothing. I sighed, a bit of annoyance creeping in. "Okay, send me the details, and I'll see what I can do." From there, it spiraled. Every visit or call seemed to come with a new hint or outright request. "Elise, you know, the winter's coming, and our house could really use some new insulation." Or "Elise, have you seen those new smart fridges? They're fascinating." Each time, I felt a bit more used, but I pushed those feelings down. They were Tom's parents, after all, and I wanted to keep the peace. The morning I found out about my dad's company going bankrupt was like any other, until it wasn't. I was sipping my coffee, scrolling through the news on my phone, when the headline hit me like a ton of bricks. I remember the cold feeling in my stomach as I read about the financial troubles, the bankruptcy filings, everything tumbling down. I called Dad immediately. His voice was calm, but I could hear the strain behind it. "Elise, it's bad. I didn't want to worry you until I had to." I was shocked. "But, what's going to happen now? What about us?" "We'll get through it, sweetheart. But things are going to change. You might need to tighten up a bit until we figure things out." The reality of it didn't hit until I had to break the news to Tom. He was getting ready for work, and I caught him just as he was about to leave. "Tom, we need to talk. It's about my dad's company." He frowned, sensing the seriousness. "What's up? Something wrong?" I took a deep breath. "His company went bankrupt. It's all over the news. We're going to have to make some big changes around here." Tom's reaction was a mix of concern and disbelief. "Wow, I mean, are you okay? What's going to happen with the apartment? And everything else?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, feeling lost. "We need to figure things out, but we'll probably have to move somewhere cheaper. Cut back on a lot of things." The following weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments. We started looking for cheaper apartments, cutting down on all our expenses. It was during this time that I noticed a shift in Tom's demeanor. He became quieter, more distant. One evening, as we were going over our budget, he snapped. "Can't believe we have to count every penny now. This isn't how I thought things would be." I was taken aback by his tone. "I know it's tough, but it's not like I planned any of this. We just have to deal with it together." "Yeah, well, it's easy for you to say. You've never had to worry about money before," he retorted sharply. His words stung, and I felt a rift growing between us. But things got even worse when we had to move in with his parents. The welcome was warm at first, but the house felt smaller with each passing day, cramped and filled with tension. Martha and Joe's attitude started to change too. Martha joined in one day when I was doing the dishes. "Elise, maybe you should cut back on the hot water. Bills aren't cheap, you know." Her words were casual, but they cut deep. "Of course, Martha. I'll make sure to be more mindful." Living there became a daily reminder of our situation. The comments about saving money, about how we were now dependent on them, chipped away at my pride and my relationship with Tom. Feeling the pressure, I finally decided to leave the charity foundation and picked up a job. But even with the extra income, it wasn't enough. Tom's patience wore thin, and his temper grew short. One night, after a particularly tough day, he exploded. "Can't you see we're drowning here, Elise? And all you do is add to the weight." I was stunned, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm trying my best, Tom. It's not like I want this life for us." His parents were no help either. They started seeing me as a freeloader, someone just taking advantage of their goodwill. At dinner, Joe would pass snide remarks. "Hope you appreciate this meal, Elise, since you're eating our food in our house." Each word was a jab, each look a reminder that I was an outsider now. It was clear I was no longer a daughter-in-law, but an unwanted guest who had overstayed her welcome. Martha's birthday was supposed to be a small family celebration at a nice local restaurant. Just me, Tom, and his folks. A chance to put aside the tensions and just enjoy a meal together. That's what I thought anyway. We got to the restaurant, and it was fancier than I expected. I felt a bit out of place, but I tried to keep up a good face for Tom's sake. We all sat down, and the waiter handed out menus. I noticed right away that mine looked different from everyone else's, a lot thinner. When I opened it, it was clearly some sort of budget menu. Confused, I looked up, catching Tom's sneering glance. He quickly looked away, not wanting to meet my eyes. "What's this?" I asked, holding up the flimsy menu. Martha, ever the peacekeeper, or so she seemed, chimed in with a laugh. "Oh, we thought that would be more suitable for you, dear. We have to watch our expenses, after all." Joe snickered and added, "Yeah, consider it part of your new budget plan. No room for the fancy stuff anymore." I felt my cheeks burn as I looked down at the options, just some salads and a soup. Meanwhile, they were all eyeing the steaks and seafood dishes. The waiter came around to take our orders, and as each of them ordered dishes with prices that made my head spin, the sting grew sharper. When it came to my turn, I could barely speak through the lump in my throat. "Just the soup, please," I muttered, wishing I could disappear into my seat. As the dinner went on, their jokes and laughter about their lavish meals felt like jabs. I tried to keep up some semblance of dignity, but then Tom dropped the real bomb. "Enjoy your simple dinner, Elise. You know, since you're more of a freeloader these days," he said, laughing like it was the funniest joke in the world. The table erupted in laughter, but it sounded cruel to my ears. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Funny you should say that, Tom," I snapped, my voice rising despite myself. "You didn't seem to mind my freeloading when I was footing the bill for dinners like this, or buying your parents whatever they asked for." The laughter stopped abruptly. The restaurant had gone quiet, and I realized we'd attracted the attention of other diners. Some even had their phones out, capturing this lovely family moment. Joe's face went red, and Martha's mouth snapped shut. Tom just stared, his smirk fading. "You know what? This isn't funny. Not at all," I continued, my voice shaking. You enjoyed my generosity when it suited you. But now, when I'm down, this is how you treat me. Like I'm less than you? Nobody had an answer. They just sat there, the color draining from their faces as they realized just how public our confrontation had gotten. I think I've had enough birthday celebration for one night, I said coldly, pushing back from the table. I didn't wait for a response. I just walked out, the sound of my heels sharp against the restaurant floor, leaving them to their expensive dishes and their newfound silence. I drove straight to my parents' house, the place I'd always considered my true home. It was late when I arrived, but they were still up, probably sensing that something was wrong. I found my dad in the living room, reading, and my mom was there knitting something that looked like it was meant to be a scarf. The moment I stepped in, they both looked up, concern etching their faces. What's wrong, Elise? My mom asked right away, her knitting needles pausing midair. I sighed, feeling the weight of the last few weeks finally starting to lift as I began to explain everything. From the financial troubles with Dad's company to how things had turned sour with Tom and his parents. Dad's brows furrowed as he listened. They did what at the dinner? He asked, his voice rising slightly in disbelief and anger. It was awful, Dad, I admitted, my voice cracking a bit from the stress. They basically called me a freeloader in front of everyone at the restaurant. Tom laughed along with his parents. Mom shook her head, setting her knitting aside. That's no way to treat family, or anyone, for that matter. Dad got up from his chair, his expression stern. You know, I always had a feeling that boy and his parents might turn out to be trouble. They seemed a bit too eager when things were good. I nodded, sinking down onto the couch. I guess I wanted to believe the best in them. I was wrong. The next day, I made the decision to leave Tom for good. I went back to our shared apartment, well, his parents' house now, to gather my things. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I had to be firm. Tom and Martha were there when I arrived. The air was thick with tension as soon as I stepped through the door. There she is, the impudent girl who made a scene at the dinner, Martha muttered loud enough for me to hear, her tone dripping with disdain. I ignored her and headed straight to the bedroom to pack my things. Tom leaned against the doorway, watching with a grin as I folded my clothes and placed them into boxes. You know, I was thinking of preparing the divorce papers. Come back in a week to sign them. His words were meant to sting, but I felt a strange sense of relief instead. That's fine. I'll be here. Dad had some news when I got back. Elise, about the company. I've managed to sort out some of the mess. We're not out of the woods yet, but there's a plan. That bit of news lifted my spirits further. Really, Dad? That's great. A week had passed since I promised Tom I'd be back to sign the divorce papers. Tomorrow was waiting for me in the living room, papers laid out on the coffee table, his expression indifferent. Without a greeting, he just nodded towards the documents. Here they are, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. I didn't say a word, I just took a seat and started signing. I could feel the eager eyes of his parents on me, barely containing their glee. As I signed the last page, Martha couldn't hold back any longer. Well, I must say, it's a relief to finally get rid of the freeloader, she snickered, glancing at Joe who nodded in agreement. Joe laughed, adding fuel to the fire. Yeah, and quite the show, watching the rich girl turn into a beggar. Quite the entertainment. Their words stung, but I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Instead, I smiled, the calm before the storm. I reached into my bag and pulled out the latest issue of a well-known business magazine, flipping it open to a highlighted article. This should be entertaining, then, I said, tossing the magazine onto the table. It landed open on the page featuring a headline about my father's company overcoming its financial crisis and now projecting even greater profits than before. Their laughter died in their throats as they read the headline. I watched as the color drained from their faces, their satisfaction turning to shock, then to panic. Tom picked up the magazine, his eyes scanning the words as if hoping to find something that would contradict what was right in front of him. Elise, wait, I stood up, my chair scraping back sharply. Save it, Tom. You and your parents showed your true colors. It's funny, isn't it? Just when you thought you had seen my downfall, it turns out you'd pushed away the cash cow. Martha and Joe were speechless, their mouths opening and closing like fish out of water. I didn't wait around to hear any excuses or pleas. Walking to my car, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was free from their greed and manipulation, ready to move forward without them. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table with my dad, discussing my next steps. He was reading the newspaper, but his attention shifted fully to me when I started talking about my plans. So, what's the plan, Elise? What's next for you? He asked, his tone serious, but supportive. I'm thinking of joining the company, Dad. I want to be part of building it back up, I said, feeling a surge of purpose. Dad looked up, surprise and pride evident in his expression. Really? That's a big step, kiddo. You sure you're up for it? I nodded confidently. Absolutely. I've been on the sidelines long enough. It's time I stepped in and helped steer the ship. Later that day, I went to the office to start my new role. The buzz of activity and the sense of purpose in the air were invigorating. I met with several team leaders, discussing strategies and upcoming projects. Everyone was welcoming, and their enthusiasm was contagious. Unexpectedly, the past tried to claw its way back into my life. Tom started calling me, his voice tentative, suggesting we try to start over. Elise, I've been thinking, maybe we could. No, Tom, I cut him off firmly each time. There's no starting over for us. I'm moving forward, not backward. And then there were the messages from his parents, suddenly overflowing with regrets and pleas for me to reconsider, to come back to their son. We know things got a bit out of hand, but we're family, they wrote, trying to tug at my heartstrings. I read the messages, each word strengthening my resolve, and replied with a categorical refusal. No. I wish you all the best, but I will not be coming back. Each refusal I sent out felt like another step forward, a step towards a future where I no longer defined myself through the lens of others' expectations but through my own ambitions and dreams. With each day that passed, I was more certain that the hardest decisions often lead to the greatest freedoms. My name's Jessica, and up until a few months ago, my life was pretty much on the ideal track you'd expect for a 25-year-old. I'd just wrapped up my degree and snagged a manager position at a bustling trading company. Things were looking up, and then, at a party thrown by some mutual friends, I met Jake. Jake was a guy you'd notice right off the bat, tall, with a loud laugh and a way of filling the room that made you feel like you were the only two people in it. He came over to where I was sitting, holding a beer in one hand and a plate of half-eaten snacks in the other. Hey, you're Jessica, right? I'm Jake. Heard you're the brain running the new show downtown, he said, sliding into the seat next to me. Yeah, that's me. I smiled, trying to match his easy demeanor. And let me guess, you're the life of every party and possibly every after-party? You got me. He laughed, clapping his hands in mock surrender. Guilty as charged. So, what brings you here, apart from obviously elevating our collective style quotient? We clicked instantly. Jake was easy to talk to, and despite his casual front, he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We spent the rest of the evening chatting about everything from our jobs to our favorite TV shows, and by the time the party wound down, we'd exchanged numbers and promised to catch up soon. In the weeks that followed, Jake and I saw a lot of each other. Our dates ranged from simple coffee meetups to adventurous evenings out in the city. He was fun, but also had a rough edge that made our conversations spark. We often debated fiercely over films or politics, him always pushing back with a grin whenever I got too bossy with my opinions. Come on, Jess, you can't seriously think that's the best movie of the year? He'd challenge, throwing his hands up in disbelief. Watch me convince you, Or are you scared you'll actually agree with me? I'd retort, bumping his shoulder lightly with mine. Life felt good. Real good. But as they say, when things seem too perfect, life has a way of throwing a curveball. I just didn't expect mine to come so fast and hit so hard. It was a clear Saturday morning, the kind where the sun decides to show up in full glory and not a single cloud dares to hide it. I was out for a drive with my folks, planning to grab lunch at that new seafood place Mom had been raving about all week. Dad was at the wheel, Mom was navigating, and I was in the back seat, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. "Jessica, put that thing down and look outside, would you? It's a beautiful day." Mom chided from the front seat, her tone playful yet firm. I laughed, slipping the phone into my purse. All right. You win, Mom. Eyes on the scenery now." Dad chimed in, his voice always steady and reassuring. "Good. You kids today with your gadgets. When I was your age, I was always looking out the window, counting cows on the road trips." We all laughed, and I leaned forward between their seats, feeling like a kid again on one of our family road trips. The conversation shifted to casual updates on relatives and Dad's recent fishing trip with his buddies. "So, caught anything bigger than a minnow this time, Dad?" I teased, poking fun at his often exaggerated fish tales. "A minnow? You'll eat your words next time I bring home a catch. Just wait," he retorted, grinning in the rearview mirror. Mom rolled her eyes, smiling. "Let's see if we can get through lunch without your father declaring himself the fishing champion of the state." The light-hearted banter was cut short by a sudden blare of a horn. Time slowed down as I looked up. A truck had veered into our lane, speeding straight toward us. Dad's hands tightened on the wheel, his knuckles white as he tried to swerve. "Hold on," he shouted, the last words I heard before the crash drowned out everything else. The impact was deafening, a brutal cacophony of shattering glass and crunching metal. My body jerked forward, then slammed back, pain shooting through every nerve. Darkness edged my vision, the sounds around me fading to a distant, muffled echo. When I came to, the world was a haze of sirens and people shouting. I tried to move, to get to my parents, but nothing responded. Panic clawed up my throat, my breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" A paramedic peered into the wreckage, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. "We're going to get you out of here, just stay calm." "Mom. Dad." My voice was weak, barely a whisper amid the noise. "Are they?" The paramedic didn't answer, his eyes briefly flicking away before meeting mine again. I didn't need words to understand the truth. Tears blurred my vision as the realization hit me like a physical blow. They worked quickly to extract me from the mangled car. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain radiating through my body, but the physical agony couldn't touch the deep, tearing ache in my heart. At the hospital, doctors buzzed around me, their faces grim as they assessed my injuries. The news wasn't good, my spine was damaged, and my legs, they might never carry my weight again. The loneliness was crushing, only interrupted by the occasional visit from a nurse or doctor. That's why when Jake walked in with his parents, it felt like a burst of normal in my sea of chaos. "Hey, Jess," Jake said softly, pulling up a chair next to my bed. His parents stood just behind him, awkward smiles plastered on their faces. "Hi, Jake," I managed, my voice raspy from disuse. "It's good to see some familiar faces." "We've been worried about you," he said, reaching out to take my hand. It felt warm, solid. "How are you holding up?" "Been better," I said, trying to keep the mood light despite the ache in my chest. "But I guess it could be worse." Linda, Jake's mom, stepped forward, a tight smile on her face. "We just want you to know we're here for you, Jessica. Whatever you need." "Yeah, thanks," I said, not sure what else to add. It's not every day you lose everything and then have your boyfriend's parents acting like they were part of the family already. Mark, his dad, was a large, imposing man who normally commanded every room he walked into. But there, in the hospital, he seemed shrunken, unsure of himself. "We've been thinking, Jessica," he began. "And well, Jake has something he wants to ask you." I frowned, confused. "Okay." Jake squeezed my hand, his eyes searching mine. "Jessica, these last few days, knowing you were here, hurt and alone, it's made me realize something." "What's that?" I asked, heart hammering. This wasn't a normal conversation. Something big was coming. "I don't want to spend another day not knowing you're in my life for good," he said, and suddenly, there was a small box in his hand. He opened it to reveal a simple, but beautiful, engagement ring. I stared at it, then at him, my mind racing. "Jake, are you serious?" "Dead serious," he said with a nod. "Marry me, Jessica. Let me take care of you." His parents watched us, barely breathing. Linda had her hands clasped together, eyes wet with tears. Mark just nodded slightly, as if confirming something to himself. It felt like a lifeline, thrown in the middle of my storm. But it also felt rushed, desperate even. Yet, looking into Jake's hopeful face, how could I say anything but, yes? Our wedding was nothing like I had imagined as a little girl. It was a modest ceremony, held in the small garden at my parents' house. I sat in my wheelchair, dressed in a simple white gown that had been altered to fit comfortably around my new reality. The guest list had shrunk to a handful of close friends and family, a stark contrast to the grand event my mother and I had playfully sketched out years ago. My parents' house, now just mine, had been modified after the accident. Ramps and rails were the new normal in my once familiar home. But so was the constant reminder of my limitations. The first few weeks were a blur of adjustments. Jake moved in and, at first, things seemed okay. He was around a lot, helping me move about, cooking meals, and generally making sure I was comfortable. I appreciated it, I did, but there was an undercurrent of tension, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. One afternoon, I was trying to reach a bowl from the upper cabinet, a feat that had become a Herculean task from my new, lower vantage point. "Need some help there, babe?" Jake asked, walking into the kitchen. "Just a bit," I replied, frustrated at having to ask yet again. He grabbed the bowl and handed it to me. "You know, I read online about some tools that might help you with this stuff. Like grabbers or something." "Yeah, maybe," I muttered, not wanting to think about stocking my home with yet more reminders of my disability. Things started to shift then. Slowly, Jake began spending more time away from home. His helpfulness waned, replaced by absences that he brushed off with vague explanations. "Where were you last night?" I asked him one evening when he came home later than usual, the smell of alcohol clinging to his clothes. "Out," was all he said as he flopped down on the couch, not even bothering to remove his shoes. "Just needed to blow off some steam." I maneuvered my wheelchair closer, feeling a mix of anger and concern. "Jake, you know I can't just go out and blow off steam. I need you here." He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry more annoyance than apology. "Jess, I can't be cooped up here all the time. It's tough for me, too, you know." The days turned into weeks, and the neglect became more apparent. Meals he used to cook turned into takeout boxes he couldn't be bothered to throw away. The bathroom that needed to be accessible became cluttered with his things, making it harder for me to maneuver. One morning, I caught him in a particularly foul mood as I asked him to move his stuff off the bathroom floor. "Can you just deal with it for once?" he snapped, his patience obviously worn thin. I didn't sign up to be a caretaker. 3 months after our wedding, Jake quit his job, dropping the news as casually as if he were talking about the weather. "I don't need to work anymore," he said one morning, coffee in hand, a smug look on his face. "You've got enough money from your folks. We're set." I stared at him, my stomach churning. "So, what, you're just going to live off my inheritance? That's your plan?" "Why not?" he shrugged. "It's ours now, isn't it?" His words chilled me. It wasn't just the house or the money he felt entitled to, it was my entire existence. I was supposed to be his wife, not his meal ticket. Things around the house started to change, and not for the better. It was the little things at first. Paintings that had hung on the walls for as long as I could remember were suddenly gone, and heirloom dishes that were supposed to be passed down to me vanished from the cupboards. At first, I thought I was going crazy. How could I misplace these things when I could barely get around? One afternoon, the house was unusually quiet. Jake and his folks were out, supposedly at some all-day event. I was alone, which was rare these days. I was in the living room, trying to reach a book from a lower shelf when Maria, my masseuse, and only real friend these days, came in for her weekly visit. "Hey, Jessica, how you holding up today?" Maria asked as she set her bag down. "Not great," I sighed, abandoning my attempt at the book. "Stuff's going missing, and I don't know if I'm just forgetting things or what." Maria frowned, helping me back into my chair. "What kind of stuff?" "Important stuff, like my mom's paintings and some antique dishes. I can't prove it, but I think someone's taking them." "That's messed up," she said, her brows knitting together in concern. "Do you want to do something about it?" "Like what?" "It's not like I can set up cameras all over the place," I muttered, feeling defeated. "Well, actually, I might know a guy who could set up some mics. Just to see if you can catch whoever's doing it talking about it?" Maria suggested, her tone careful. I hesitated. It felt a bit extreme, but then again, I needed to know. "Okay, yeah. Let's do it." A few days later, Maria came by with a guy who discreetly placed microphones in several rooms. It was all very spy-like, and I half expected it to be a bust. But what we eventually heard chilled me to the bone. It was late one evening, a few weeks after the mics were installed, and I was listening through the recordings. Jake's voice came through first, clear as day. "We should be able to get a good price for those dishes," he said, sounding nonchalant. "Yeah, the paintings fetched a pretty penny too," his mother, Linda, responded. There was a clinking sound, like she was sorting through silverware. I felt sick. They were stealing from me, selling off my family's things right under my nose. "What about Jessica? She's bound to notice more things missing," Jake's dad, Mark, chimed in. "That wheelchair keeps her pretty tied down. And once we move her to a home, we'll have all the time in the world to sell off the rest," Jake said, a hardness in his voice I'd never heard before. I paused the recording, tears stinging my eyes. Not only were they stealing from me, but they were planning to get rid of me, to shove me in some home and wipe their hands clean of me. I replayed the recording when Maria came over next. She listened, her face set in anger. "We need to do something," she said firmly. "You can't let them get away with this." I nodded, wiping away tears. "I know. I don't know what to do. First, we save every recording. Then, we go to the police. And you call your lawyer," Maria plotted out, her tone brooking no argument. "Okay," I agreed, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the betrayal. "Let's take these bastards down." The next morning, I woke up to find the ramps that allowed me access to different parts of the house mysteriously dismantled. I stared in disbelief from the doorway of my bedroom, my usual path to freedom abruptly cut off. "Jake," I called out, hoping for an explanation but dreading the answer. When he finally appeared, his face was a mask of feigned concern. "Oh, hey babe," Jake said casually, as if nothing was amiss. "We had to take down those ramps. They were getting old and, safety hazard and all that." "Safety hazard?" "Jake, I need those to get around." "How am I supposed to move through the house now?" My voice cracked with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Don't worry about it, Jess. We'll figure something out," he replied, his tone dismissive, as if it were a minor inconvenience rather than a major blockade to my independence. "But I am worried, Jake. You can't just decide these things without talking to me first. I live here too, remember?" I snapped, my frustration boiling over. Jake shrugged, the gesture like a slap in the face. "Look, I'm just trying to look out for you. You could have hurt yourself with those old ramps." His words twisted in my gut. Looking out for me? More like trapping me. I spent the rest of the day confined to one part of the house, my mind racing with the implications of what they'd done. The walls felt like they were closing in, each room a reminder of my growing helplessness. The next few days were a blur of helplessness and brewing fury. I was stuck, literally and figuratively. Jake and his parents came and went as they pleased, their voices low and conspiratorial, leaving me out of their hushed conversations. One evening, Linda came by to check on me, her fake smile firmly in place. "Jessica, darling, how are you holding up? We're just so worried about you being on your own," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm managing," I replied coldly, not in the mood to play nice. "Seems like I'll have to get used to it, with the ramps gone and all." "Oh, that was just a precaution, dear," Linda said, patting my hand in a patronizing manner. "We're just trying to keep you safe. You know how much we care about you." Her words stung, the lie so blatant it was almost laughable. Safe? They were stripping away my mobility, my freedom, piece by piece. That night, after Linda had left with a breezy goodbye, I called Maria. "They're boxing me in, Maria. I can't even get around my own house now," I said, the edge in my voice sharp with anger and a trace of fear. "We need to act fast, Jessica," Maria responded, her voice tight with urgency. "This is more serious than we thought. It's not just about stealing from you now, it's about control." After we hung up, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The feeling of being trapped was suffocating, but the fire of defiance was building within me. I just needed a chance, any chance, to turn the tables on them. And I was determined to find it. The next morning was a whirlwind. First, I called the service that deals with the disabled to report how Jake and his parents had dismantled the ramps, my main way of moving freely around my own home. They were quick to react, promising to send someone to assess the situation immediately. Next, I called my lawyer, Mr. Thompson, and explained everything. He was furious on my behalf and wasted no time. "I'll be there this afternoon with a couple of officers and a representative from the disability service. We'll sort this out," he assured me over the phone. By mid-afternoon, my living room felt more crowded than it had in a long time. Mr. Thompson, 2 police officers, and a representative from the Disability Rights Service were all present, along with Jake and his parents. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with anticipation and dread. Jake and his dad looked shocked, like deer caught in headlights, when Mr. Thompson started speaking. "We are here to conduct a thorough check of the premises," he announced. "I have here an inventory of all items listed in Jessica's parents' will, and we will be verifying that these items are accounted for." Jake tried to protest. "This is ridiculous. Jessica, why are you doing this?" Before I could answer, the representative from the Disability Service intervened, his tone stern. "First, we need to address the removal of accessibility features in this home. It's been brought to our attention that necessary ramps have been dismantled, significantly reducing Ms. Thompson's mobility and independence." The color drained from Jake's face as the representative walked through the house, noting where each ramp had been removed. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson began checking off items from the inventory list. It didn't take long for discrepancies to appear. Several high-value items were missing, just as I had suspected. Linda started crying, her sobs loud and dramatic. "Please, Jessica, we didn't mean any harm. We were just trying to make things easier." "Easier for who, exactly?" I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Mr. Thompson continued his inventory check, his expression growing grimmer with each missing item. "This is serious," he muttered, jotting down notes. Mark, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice shaky. "Look, maybe we got carried away, but we can sort this out. Let's talk about this, Jessica." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. "You've been stealing from me and planning to ship me off. There's no excusing that." As the reality of their situation set in, Jake and his parents became increasingly panicked. Mr. Thompson finished his inspection and nodded to the officers. Based on the evidence and the discrepancies here, I think we have enough to move forward. I looked at Jake, his parents, and then at the officers. I want to press charges, I said, my voice firm. And I have recordings of their conversations discussing their plans to sell my inheritance. The officers listened to the recordings, their expressions stern. After a few moments, one of them turned to Jake and his parents. "You are under arrest for theft and conspiracy," he announced, and began reading them their rights. Jake looked at me, betrayal written all over his face, not understanding that the real betrayal was his own. As they were led away, his mother's cries echoing down the hallway, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. It was over, at least this chapter of it. The court case was a grueling process, but every day I showed up, determined to see it through. Sitting in the courtroom, watching Jake and his parents face the consequences of their actions, brought a mix of emotions. I was angry, but also relieved that the truth was finally out. During one of the breaks, Jake tried to approach me. "Jessica, I'm sorry. I never wanted things to go this far," he said, his voice low. I looked at him, the man I thought I knew, the man I thought loved me. "Sorry doesn't change what you did, Jake. You made your choices." Jake and his parents were found guilty on multiple counts of theft and fraud. The judge was stern as he delivered the sentence. "Let this serve as a reminder that manipulation and greed have no place in our society," he declared. With the legal battles behind me, I focused on rehabilitation. The doctors were amazed at my progress. "You're a fighter, Jessica. You've come further than we initially thought possible," one doctor said during a session. Rehab wasn't just about physical recovery, it was about rebuilding my life. I started going out more, meeting new people, and even took up a new hobby, painting. It was therapeutic, a way to express everything I had been through. One day, at a community art class, I met Alex. He was funny and kind, and he had this way of looking at life that made me believe in the good again. We clicked immediately, and soon, we were spending a lot of time together. "Jessica, this might sound crazy, but I feel like meeting you was meant to be," Alex said one evening as we walked through the park, my wheelchair rolling smoothly beside him. I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in a long while. "I think I can believe that. It's nice to have someone who just gets it, you know?" "Yeah, I do," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand gently. One morning, I visited the grave of my parents. I told them about everything that had happened, about the trial, my recovery, and Alex. "I miss you both so much, but I'm getting back on my feet, literally and figuratively," I said, laying flowers on their tombstone. Walking away from the cemetery, I felt their love with me, like a gentle push forward. I was moving on, but I was taking them with me in my heart. I'm Mara, just a regular person who used to work as an economist until life threw me a curveball. 5 years ago, everything changed when I met Tom at a party hosted by my best friend, Lisa. It was a typical Friday night, and Lisa had been on my case about meeting someone new. "You gotta get out more, Mara. You can't just work and sit at home all the time," she had chided me on the phone. I finally gave in, thinking it would shut her up for a while. The party was in full swing when I arrived, a little nervous, clutching a bottle of wine like a lifeline. Lisa greeted me at the door with her usual big smile and even bigger glass of wine. "Mara, you made it. Come on, I want you to meet someone," she said, dragging me through the crowd before I could even catch my breath. That's when I first saw Tom. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, beer in hand, laughing loudly at something on his phone. Lisa introduced us, and his smile shifted my way, lighting up his face. "Hey, I'm Tom. Lisa's told me a lot about you." "Hopefully, all good things," I replied, trying to sound lighthearted. "Only the best," he shot back, giving me a wink that made me blush. We got to talking, and I was surprised at how easy it was to chat with him. He worked in logistics for a transport company and seemed to know a lot about a lot of things. He was confident, maybe too confident, but it was kind of refreshing. Later in the evening, we found ourselves sitting on Lisa's porch, away from the noise. "So, why has a catch like you been hiding?" Tom asked, a cheeky grin on his face. "I'm not hiding. Just busy with work and stuff," I said, fumbling with my words a bit. "Too busy for a date with me?" he teased, not missing a beat. I laughed, a real laugh, not the polite kind you do out of courtesy. "I suppose I could make some time." "That's what I wanted to hear," Tom said, clinking his beer bottle against my wine glass. As the party wound down, Tom offered to drive me home. I hesitated at first, but Lisa gave me a look that said, "Go for it, girl." So, I did. We talked the whole way, and by the time he dropped me off, he had snagged my number and a promise for a dinner date the next week. My mom was thrilled when I told her about Tom. "Oh, Mara, finally! He sounds wonderful. When can I meet him?" she gushed over the phone. "Slow down, Mom. It's just been a few dates," I reminded her, but I couldn't hide my smile. Her excitement was infectious. The day Tom proposed, 6 months later, was simple, yet perfect. We were at my favorite park, the one where we'd had our third date. He got down on one knee right by the lake, and I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, tears of joy streaming down my face. Mom came to the wedding, beaming with pride. "I can't wait for the grandkids," she whispered during the reception, already planning ahead. I just laughed and hugged her, hoping that part of the dream would come true too. Settling into married life was easy at first. We moved into the house I inherited from my dad. It was more than just a building. It was filled with memories of my childhood and the dreams I had of making it a home for my own family. I quit my job and became a housewife. The money my dad left me was enough for a comfortable existence. Tom and I spent weekends fixing the place up. He joked about my obsession with antique furniture, but he loved the results. "Our home," he would say, wrapping his arms around me as we admired our work. "It was supposed to be our forever home." That's how it all started, anyway. I thought I had everything figured out, but life, as always, had other plans. After the honeymoon phase of our marriage began to fade, Tom and I found ourselves face to face with reality. Trying to start a family wasn't as straightforward as we'd hoped. Month after month, disappointment greeted us, and each negative test weighed heavily on us, especially on me. Tom's patience was wearing thin. One evening, after another failed attempt, he exploded. "I just don't get it, Mara. What's the problem? Why isn't this working?" he shouted, slamming his fist on the kitchen table so hard that the plates rattled. I was stirring the soup on the stove, trying to keep my composure. "The doctor said these things take time, Tom. We just need to be patient," I replied, my voice trembling a bit from the tension. "Patient? We've been patient for over a year now. I'm sick of waiting." His voice was raw with frustration. I poured the soup into bowls, my hands shaking. "I'm doing everything I can," I said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah? Well, maybe it's not enough." He stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the echo of his words. The next day, Tom apologized for his outburst, but the cycle of hope and disappointment continued, each cycle chipping away at the love and warmth we once shared. Our weekends transformed from cozy time spent together to silent meals and even quieter evenings. One Saturday, as I was trying out a new recipe I learned in a cooking class, Tom walked into the kitchen. He watched me for a moment before speaking. "That smells good. Learning anything new?" he asked, his tone light, trying to make conversation. "Yeah, it's a new recipe from the cooking class. Thought I'd try it out," I responded, focusing on chopping vegetables rather than meeting his eyes. "Great, another dish for the two of us." "It's always just the two of us, isn't it?" His words stung, and I could hear the bitterness seeping in. I stopped chopping, placing the knife down with a clatter. "What do you want me to say, Tom? I'm trying here. It's not like I don't want a family." We sat down to eat the meal I prepared in silence. It was good, but the air between us was thick with unspoken words and buried frustrations. As the months rolled on, the pressure only grew. Conversations about the future became minefields, and Tom often retreated into his work, coming home late, leaving early, and growing more distant. I tried to fill my days with activities, keeping the house immaculate, hoping somehow that would fix things. One evening, while Tom was working late again, I called Lisa for some support. "Hey, Mara, how's it going?" Lisa's voice was a welcome sound. "Not great, Lise. It's just hard right now. I feel like I'm living with a stranger," I confessed, sinking into the couch. "Oh, Mara, I'm so sorry. Anything I can do?" "Just talking helps," I said, tears threatening to spill. "I miss him, Lisa. I miss us." "I know, hon, but you guys are strong. You'll get through this. Maybe see a counselor? It might help to talk to someone neutral." "Yeah, maybe," I murmured, not convinced, but willing to try anything to regain some semblance of the life we once dreamed of. Lately, I've been feeling off, like my body's running on empty. No matter how much I sleep, I wake up tired. It's been going on for a while, and it's getting worse, not better. I tried talking to Tom about it, thinking he'd want to help, or at least understand. "Tom, I'm really struggling here. I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm always exhausted," I told him one evening, hoping for some compassion, or maybe just a bit of concern. He barely looked up from his phone. "You're probably just being lazy. You need to get up and do something, stop pretending." That stung. Pretending? As if I'd choose to feel like this. His words cut deep, and I decided right then to stop talking about it. What was the point if he just got mad? As the days dragged on, I did less around the house. Cooking and cleaning took all the energy I didn't have. Every task felt like climbing a mountain. Tom noticed, all right, and he wasn't happy. "Why is this place such a mess, Mara? What have you been doing all day?" He'd snap as soon as he walked through the door, his tone getting harsher with each passing week. I tried to explain, again, hoping maybe this time he'd get it. "Tom, I told you, I'm not feeling well. I can barely get off the couch most days." "Great, just what I need, a sick wife. Maybe I'd be better off alone." He threw his hands up, frustration written all over his face. Talks of divorce started slipping into our arguments, and they were getting more frequent. He was also staying out a lot, coming home late from work, or sometimes not at all on the weekends. He said he was caught up at the office, but the clues were adding up to something else. There was the smell of unfamiliar perfume when he came home, the secretive texts I'd catch glimpses of when he thought I wasn't looking. It was like he wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I should have confronted him, maybe thrown a fit, or dug deeper into those late-night texts. But I was too worn out, too beaten down. One night, he came home late, reeking of that same perfume. He was humming some tune, almost happy. It was like he didn't care if I knew. I couldn't hold it back any longer. "You smell like perfume, Tom. Where have you been?" My voice was weak, but I needed to know. He froze, then shrugged, brushing it off like it was nothing. "Oh, that? It's probably just from someone at the office. We had a late meeting." "A meeting, right. You expect me to believe that?" I was too tired to yell, too tired to fight, but I let the suspicion hang in the air between us. "What do you want me to say, Mara? You're always too tired, too sick. Maybe think about that before you start accusing me of things." His dismissive tone was like a slap in the face. One quiet afternoon, when Tom was supposedly at another one of his endless work meetings, I mustered up the energy to tidy up a bit. It was one of my better days, though better lately just meant I could get out of bed without feeling like I might pass out. I decided to start with Tom's stuff, thinking maybe I'd clear out some old clothes for donation. That's when I stumbled upon something I never expected. Hidden in the back of his drawer, under a pile of seldom-worn dress shirts, was a small bottle. Curious, I picked it up and examined it. Male contraceptive pills. My heart sank. Why would Tom have these? We had been trying, well, I thought we were trying to have a baby. I felt the room spin as the implications hit me like a freight train. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the bottle still in my hand. By the time Tom came home, I had worked myself into quite a state, alternating between tears and fury. He walked in, cheerful as can be, until he saw my face. "What's wrong, Mara? You look like you've seen a ghost." I threw the bottle at him. It hit the wall next to where he stood and fell to the floor. "Care to explain this?" My voice was shaking, but I managed to keep it loud enough. Tom picked up the bottle, his face a mix of confusion and then a smirk. "Oh, that? Look, Mara, I didn't want to say it outright, but yeah, I've been taking these. I realized I don't want kids. At least not with you." His words felt like a punch in the gut. "You what? All this time, you let me think the problem was me?" He shrugged, his smirk turning into a full-on laugh. "Well, it wasn't a problem for me until now. I guess you finally caught on." I felt a rush of anger and clarity. "I want a divorce, Tom." He raised his eyebrows, almost relieved. "Fine by me. But we'll be splitting everything, right? The house, the cars, all of it." I couldn't help but laugh, even though my heart was pounding and my health was wavering. "Actually, Tom, everything we have was bought with the money my dad left me. It's all in my name. You won't get a cent." Tom's face turned red, his anger boiling over. "You think you can keep it all? I'll take you to court. I'll sue you for every damn thing you own." As we argued, my vision started to blur, and a wave of dizziness overwhelmed me. I felt the room spinning faster, and before I could grasp onto something, everything went black. When I came to, the room was spinning, and I could hear faint voices in the background. My vision was blurry, but I could make out two figures in the kitchen. My heart pounded as I strained to hear what was being said. It was Tom's voice, and he wasn't alone. "Just need to be patient a bit longer," I heard a woman's voice say, low and urgent. "Everything will fall into place once she's out of the picture." Tom's reply was a hushed, anxious whisper. "Are you sure this is going to work? It feels risky, and if anyone finds out." "Will you relax? I've got it covered. I know what I'm doing," she snapped back. The confidence in her tone was chilling. "The meds are untraceable, they'll just think her body gave out. Kidney failure, maybe." I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. My hands trembled as I gripped the arm of the sofa, trying to process the betrayal. Was Tom really planning something so sinister? To think he'd go this far. I gathered all the strength I could muster and managed to crawl a bit closer, hiding behind the doorframe. "Listen to me, Tom. We're in this together now. You said you wanted a way out, right? This is it. No messy divorce, no losing half your stuff. Just wait till she's gone," the woman coaxed. My breath hitched, and I stifled a gasp. The betrayal cut deeper with each word. I needed to see who was with him. Carefully, peering around the corner, I caught a glimpse of the woman. Dark hair, confident posture. Could it be someone from his work? Their conversation was cut short as they heard a noise, the cat knocking something over in another room. They quickly lowered their voices further, and I couldn't make out the words anymore. Realizing the danger of my situation, I knew I had to act weak. I crawled back to where I had previously lain, positioning myself as if I had lost consciousness again. From my feigned position, I heard their conversation end with a soft murmur of agreement, followed by the sound of a kiss, a sound that made my stomach churn. Footsteps approached, and then grew fainter as I heard the front door open and close quietly. Tom was sending her away. Moments later, he came back to where I was unconscious. He muttered under his breath as he picked me up. "Always something with you, isn't it? Just can't handle things like a normal person." His arms felt cold and his grip was firm as he carried me upstairs, to our bedroom. The physical closeness, once a source of comfort, now felt threatening, but I kept my breathing even, pretending to be out cold. Gently, he laid me on the bed. I could feel his presence lingering as if he was assessing if I truly was out. After a moment, I heard him sigh heavily and then the sound of his footsteps retreating. The bedroom door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the darkness. The next morning, Tom's whole demeanor changed. He woke me up with breakfast in bed, something he hadn't done in months, and his face was lined with a softness I hadn't seen in a long time. "Mara, I'm really sorry about everything," he said, his voice gentle, almost careful. "I've been a jerk, and I shouldn't have pushed you so hard. Please, let's not talk about divorce anymore. I love you, more than anything." Hearing him say that, after everything I'd overheard, felt surreal. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "Okay, Tom, we can try to work things out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. His relief was palpable, and he kissed my forehead before getting ready for work. "I'll do better, you'll see," he promised as he left. As soon as the door shut behind him, my act dropped. I grabbed my phone and called my mom. "Mom, I need you to come here. It's urgent," I said as soon as she picked up. Her voice was laced with immediate concern. "What's wrong, Mara? You sound upset." "It's Tom. I can't explain everything over the phone, but it's bad. I need you here," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. Without hesitation, she responded, "I'm booking the next flight out. I'll be there as soon as I can, sweetheart." It took 2 agonizing days for her to arrive. When she did, I spilled everything: the overheard conversation, my sudden health issues, my fears about being poisoned. Hearing it all out loud made it even more terrifying, but Mom was my rock. "Oh, Mara," she sighed, her eyes welling up with worry. "We need to get you to a hospital, right now." At the hospital, I relayed my symptoms and suspicions to the doctor, who listened intently and immediately ordered a series of tests. Waiting for the results was excruciating, but finally, the doctor returned with a grave expression. "We found a potent substance in your bloodstream that's consistent with your symptoms. It's typically used in medications to manage severe conditions, but taken without need, it can be extremely harmful," he explained. My heart sank. "I haven't been taking any medications. That means—" Mom gripped my hand tightly, her lips set in a thin line. "It means Tom has been giving it to you, doesn't it? We suspected, but now we know." The doctor nodded grimly. "Given the situation, I've taken the liberty of informing the police. They are concerned about your safety and suggest a plan to catch your husband red-handed." I was hesitant, the danger feeling all too real. "You mean, pretend like I don't know anything? Let him think he's still fooling me?" "That's the idea. It's the best way to ensure we catch him without him altering his behavior too soon," the officer who had joined explained. After a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision, I agreed. "Okay, let's do it. If it'll stop him and protect anyone else from being hurt by him, I'll do what's necessary." The next day was like a scene from a twisted drama. Tom came by the hospital with a bag of my personal belongings and a thermos of green tea, my favorite, or so he claimed. He had this look on his face, all caring and concerned, but I saw right through it. "Brought you some tea, love. I know how much you like it when it's freshly brewed," he said, placing the thermos on the small hospital table with a soft clink. "Thanks, just leave it on the table. I'll have some in a bit," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Tom frowned, pushing the thermos closer to me. "Come on, Mara, have some now. It'll warm you up," he insisted, his voice taking on a pressing tone. I shook my head slightly. "Later, Tom. I'm really not up for it right now." Just then, the door to my room swung open, and 2 police officers stepped in. Tom startled, his hand twitching towards the thermos. In a swift move that betrayed his nervousness, he tried to tip it over, to spill its contents on the floor. "Don't move," one of the officers commanded, rushing over to stop him. They grabbed the thermos, securing it, while the other officer grabbed Tom's arms, pulling them behind his back. You are being detained on suspicion of attempting to harm your wife, the officer holding Tom announced as they cuffed him. Tom's face went white, his eyes darting around the room in panic. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "I was just bringing her some tea." The officers weren't buying it. They led him out of the room, his protests fading as they moved down the hallway. I sat there, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over me. The police had acted just in time, part of their plan to catch Tom in the act based on the evidence and my testimony. Later, at the police station, I learned more. Tom had been interrogated, and it all came out. He had been plotting with his mistress, a nurse with knowledge of medicines, to poison me slowly. They wanted it to look like natural causes, like kidney failure, so they could take everything I owned. It's clear now. His intentions were lethal. "You're lucky, Mara. It's good you came to us when you did," the detective told me, his face grim. Tom and his mistress were charged, their plans laid bare in court for all to see. I attended every hearing, bolstered by my family and friends' support. Watching him face the consequences, I felt a strong sense of vindication. The jury didn't take long to deliver their verdict, guilty on all counts. After the trial, reporters swarmed outside, eager for a statement. Justice was served, I told them, my voice firmer than I felt. And now, I'm ready to move forward. After the dust settled from the trial and Tom and his mistress were locked away, I didn't just sit back. I was still reeling from all the damage they had done, not just to my life, but to my health. I decided to take further action and filed a lawsuit against both of them for the physical and emotional harm they caused. It was a tough process, dragging all those details out in court again, but it was worth it. The court ruled in my favor, ordering them to pay me compensation for all the suffering they inflicted. It felt like a final stamp of justice, acknowledgement of everything I had been through. Mom had been my rock throughout this ordeal. When the house finally sold, she was right there, packing boxes with me. "You did the right thing, selling it," she said as we taped up another box of kitchen stuff. "I know, Mom. I just couldn't stay there, not with all those memories," I replied, wiping a smear of dust off my cheek. "Now, you've got a clean slate, Mara. You can start building something new, something better," she encouraged, her voice strong and sure. That's exactly what I intended to do. I moved back in with Mom for a while. Living with her brought a sense of peace and stability back into my life that I hadn't realized I'd missed so much. Soon enough, I started looking for a job. I wanted something that felt meaningful, where I could make a difference. That's when I found the opening at a charity organization that helped people who were struggling through tough times. It seemed like a perfect fit, a way to use my ordeal to help others. I landed the job after a heartfelt interview where I shared part of my story. "We're really glad to have you on board, Mara. Your experience and strength are going to be invaluable here," my new boss, Janet, told me on my first day. "Thanks, Janet. I'm ready to get started. I want to help people find their way out of dark places," I responded, feeling a surge of purpose. Work was challenging, but incredibly rewarding. Every day felt like I was making a difference, giving back some of the help and support I'd received from people like Lisa and Mom during my darkest days. I've always believed life doesn't give you anything you can't handle, but it sure does like to test your limits. That's what I was thinking as I packed up the last of my boxes in the small, sunlit apartment I'd called home for nearly a decade. "You're really doing it, huh, Emma? Big city, big job?" my neighbor, Joe, asked as he leaned against my open door, sipping from a can of beer. "Yeah, Joe. It's finally happening," I replied, taping up another box. "Can't say I'm not a bit nervous, though." "Ah, you'll do fine. You're tough as nails," Joe chuckled, his voice gruff with years of smoking and late-night drinks. "Just don't forget us little people when you're climbing that corporate ladder." I smiled, wiping my hands on my jeans. "I could never forget you, Joe. You know too many of my secrets." We both laughed, the sound echoing in the now empty room. It felt strange to leave this place. It wasn't just the apartment, but everything it represented, my struggles, my wins, and the endless nights of studying while working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. After Joe left, I made one last call to the one person who mattered most. "Hey, Mom, it's me. Just wanted to check in before I hit the road." "Emma, darling, are you all packed? Did you eat something?" My mother's voice was always filled with concern. "Yeah, Mom, all packed. And I grabbed a sandwich, don't worry." "Oh, good. I wish I could be there to help." "Are you sure this is what you want, Emma? It's such a big change." I knew this move scared her. Since it had always been just the 2 of us, any change felt monumental. "It's a great opportunity, Mom. I can't pass it up. I promise I'll visit soon, okay?" There was a pause, the line crackling slightly. "I know, honey. I'm proud of you. Just, be careful, okay?" Hanging up, I took a deep breath, looking around the bare room once more. It wasn't just a new job. This was a fresh start, a chance to prove myself, and maybe, just maybe, make my mom proud. Driving to the new city was a blur of highway lines and radio static. When I arrived, the new branch office was imposing, all sleek glass and sharp angles, so different from the cozy, cluttered spaces I was used to. On my first day, nerves jittery and palms sweaty, I pushed through the revolving doors and into the lobby. I must have looked lost because a guy in a neatly pressed suit stopped in front of me, a friendly smile on his face. "You must be Emma." "I'm Mark, I'll be helping you get settled in," he said, extending his hand. Taking it, I was surprised by his firm grip. "Thanks, I appreciate it. It's a bit overwhelming." "Stick with me, and you'll be fine," Mark assured me with a nod. "Let's start by introducing you to the team and then I'll show you your new office." As we walked through the corridors, his easy manner helped calm my nerves. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I could really make this work. "First rule of the game here," Mark said as we approached a set of large double doors. "Never let them see you sweat." I laughed, more at ease than I'd been all morning. "Got it. No sweating." "Exactly. You'll fit right in." Settling into the new job and city was like learning to dance to a completely new rhythm. The work was tougher, the stakes higher, and the pace relentless. But Mark was there every step of the way, showing me the ropes without making me feel like a total noob. "Okay, so everyone uses this software here. It's not rocket science, but it might as well be if you've never seen it before," Mark explained as we sat in my new, stark office. He leaned over my desk, his fingers flying over the keyboard to demonstrate. "I've used something similar in my last job," I said, trying to keep up. "Good, you're not starting from scratch then," Mark said with a grin. "You'll catch on quick. You always do." It wasn't just his knowledge that helped, it was his attitude. He didn't patronize or hover. Instead, he was straightforward and, to my relief, had a sense of humor that made the long hours easier. "Hey, Emma, how about we grab a coffee? You look like you need a caffeine hit," Mark suggested one particularly grueling afternoon. "I was born needing a caffeine hit," I quipped, standing to stretch my legs. At the coffee shop, the casual setting helped us step away from our roles at work. Mark shared stories about growing up in the city, and I found myself opening up about my small-town life and all the quirks that came with it. The more time we spent together, both in and out of work, the more I appreciated his company. He was easy to be around, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could be myself. One evening after work, as we walked back to the office from a nearby diner, Mark stopped and looked at me seriously. "Emma, I've been thinking. We're great partners at work, right?" "Right," I nodded, wondering where this was going. "So, what if we think about making this a regular thing? Like, not just as colleagues or coffee buddies?" he asked, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "You mean, like, a date?" I asked, trying not to sound too surprised. "Yeah, exactly, a date. I like you, Emma. And I think we could be good together," he said, looking me straight in the eyes. I took a moment, considering. Mark was great. We got along, shared a lot of laughs, and he had already seen me at my worst, surviving on coffee and zero sleep. Plus, I was definitely interested. Okay, yeah. Let's try a date. I smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Great. It's a date then. How about this Friday? Dinner at that Italian place you said you loved? He suggested with a hopeful look. It's a plan. It's a date, I confirmed, and we both grinned, a little relieved. From that day on, things changed between us, but in a good way. We still worked together, still had our coffee runs, but now there was an added layer to our relationship, something that felt both thrilling and terrifying. 2 years slipped by quicker than I'd ever imagined. Mark and I got married, settling into a rhythm of life together that felt as natural as breathing. We were happy, genuinely so, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. I talked to my mom on the phone often, but only made it back home for the holidays. Each call, I noticed something was a bit off. Mom seemed more forgetful, her thoughts a bit scattered. It worried me. I even brought up the idea of her moving in with us, or considering a nursing home, but she was adamant. No, Emma, I'm fine on my own. Don't fuss over me, she'd say stubbornly, brushing off my concerns. As for my new in-laws, our relationship remained cool, distant even. They never really warmed up to me, treating me with a polite indifference that was hard to crack. At family gatherings, I often felt more like an outsider than a daughter-in-law. It was uncomfortable, but Mark was a solid presence by my side, always quick to divert the conversation or lighten the mood. Life had settled into a comfortable routine, Mark and I juggling work and home, while my worries about Mom's health simmered on the back burner. Then, Helen, my mother-in-law, started becoming more involved in our lives, and not in a way I appreciated. It started innocently enough, a phone call here and there, asking if we could pick up some groceries for her since we were already out shopping. Hey Emma, could you grab me some of that bread I like? Oh, and maybe some of that fancy cheese you got last time? I'll pay you back, promise, she'd say, her voice always upbeat, but somehow it felt forced. Sure, Helen. No problem, I'd reply, trying to keep the peace and make an effort. But the grocery lists grew longer, and the promises to pay back soon just stopped coming. One day, after I came home tired from a long day at work, I found Mark in the kitchen, sorting through a pile of receipts. What's all this? I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. It's from my mom, Mark said, not looking up. Your mom? What do you mean? I frowned, picking up a receipt. It was for a dinner at a high-end restaurant, a dinner I didn't attend. She's been asking me to pay for a lot of stuff. She asked you too, hasn't she? Mark asked, rubbing his temples. Yes, she has, I admitted, feeling a knot in my stomach. I thought it was just now and then. How bad is it? Mark spread the receipts on the counter, showing dinners, groceries, and even some clothes. It's adding up, Emma. This isn't just a few favors. It's becoming a regular thing. The next day, I decided to confront Helen about it. I called her, trying to keep my voice calm. Helen, we need to talk about the money, I began. It's getting a bit out of hand. Oh, Emma, I thought you didn't mind. Your family, after all. Helen's voice was light, but there was a sharpness to it that I hadn't noticed before. I don't mind helping, Helen, but this is more than helping. It's like we're your personal ATM, I said, the words harsher than I intended. There was a pause, and then Helen laughed, a short, humorless sound. Well, I didn't realize you were keeping tabs. I'll make sure not to bother you anymore. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone in confusion. That night, I told Mark about the conversation. He was quiet for a long time, then he took my hand. I'm sorry, Emma. I should have noticed sooner. I'll talk to her. After the money talk with Helen, things between us and Mark's parents turned frosty. They stopped asking for money, but the damage to our relationship was done. It was like walking on eggshells whenever we met, each conversation strained and filled with polite, hollow words. It was during my birthday dinner when the tension truly surfaced. We had invited both sets of parents to celebrate, hoping to smooth things over with a nice meal at our place. Mark's parents arrived last, and right off the bat, things felt off. Helen and Frank walked in without a gift, which wasn't a big deal to me, but the way they mentioned it struck a nerve. We didn't bring a present. After all, Mark is the best gift we could have ever given you, Helen said with a tight smile as they entered. I forced a smile, trying to keep the evening light. Well, I'm lucky to have him, I replied, guiding them into the living room where drinks were set up. Throughout dinner, the conversation veered from trivial to tense. Helen was particularly inquisitive that night, her questions sharp and probing. So, Emma, how's your mother doing? Still living in that little house of hers? She asked, stirring her drink casually. Yeah, she's fine, thanks for asking. She loves that place, wouldn't dream of leaving it, I answered, trying not to let on how much her interest bothered me. And her health? Must be tough, getting older without someone to look after her. Helen pressed on, her eyes narrowing slightly. She manages well enough. We talk every day, I said firmly, hoping she'd drop the subject. Frank chimed in then, his tone unusually harsh. Seems risky at her age, being all alone. You sure that's wise? I glanced at Mark, who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. We've discussed other options, but she's quite independent. Thanks for your concern, though, he interjected, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. The rest of the evening passed with a palpable undercurrent of tension. After the meal, while we were having dessert, Helen continued her interrogation under the guise of casual conversation. Must be hard, balancing a career and worrying about an aging parent, she remarked, looking at me pointedly. It is, but it's nothing I can't handle, I said, my voice colder than I intended. We do what we have to do, right? Of course, dear, Helen replied, her voice dripping with insincerity. Just make sure you're not biting off more than you can chew. The moment they left, the relief was tangible. Mark let out a deep breath, running his hands through his hair. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why they were acting like that, he apologized, looking genuinely upset. It's okay, Mark. It's not your fault, I assured him, though inside, my mind raced with anxiety. Why was Helen so interested in my mom all of a sudden? What was she getting at? The phone rang early on a Saturday morning, slicing through the quiet like a siren in the night. Groggy and a bit annoyed, I fumbled for the phone on the nightstand, knocking over a glass of water in the process. Hello? I mumbled, still half asleep. Emma, honey, you have to come get me. They've taken everything. I don't know what to do. My mom's voice came through, frantic and shaky. I sat up straight, instantly awake. Mom, slow down. What happened? Who took what? It's the house, Emma. The bank, they've sealed it off. I can't get any of my things. They said I owe them money, so much money. I don't understand. Her voice cracked, and I could hear the fear in every word. My heart pounded. Okay, I'm coming. Just stay where you are. Where are you? I'm in the hospital. They brought me here last night. They thought I was having a stroke, but it was just my blood pressure. It shot right up, Emma. I was so scared. I'm getting the next flight out. Mark will come with me. We'll figure this out, I promise. Hanging up, I turned to find Mark already sitting up, concern etching his face. What's going on? He asked. It's my mom. Something terrible has happened. We need to go to her. Now, I said, throwing the covers off and starting to pack a bag with shaking hands. Mark was on his feet in an instant, pulling clothes from drawers without a word. We were a team, and right then, I'd never been more grateful for his support. The flight was a blur of worry and whispered plans. As soon as we landed, we raced to the hospital where my mom was staying. Seeing her in that hospital bed, pale and frightened, was like a punch to the gut. She looked so small, so vulnerable. Emma, oh thank God. She sobbed as I rushed to her side. I'm here, Mom. It's going to be okay, I soothed, holding her hand tightly. She clung to me, then looked over at Mark. Thank you for coming, both of you. I'm so sorry to drag you into this. It's no trouble, Sophie. We're here to help, Mark reassured her, his voice steady. Once we had calmed her down, I gently prodded for more details. Mom, tell us exactly what happened. Start from the beginning. Taking a deep breath, she explained. A few months ago, someone called. They said they were from my bank and that I had an unpaid loan. For your education, they said. It was so much money, Emma. They told me it was $50,000. I didn't know what to do. My stomach twisted. But, Mom, you didn't take out any loan for my education. It was all scholarships and your hard work. I know, honey, I know that now. But they were so convincing. They knew where you went to school, when you graduated. I got scared. They said they could help me take out a loan to cover it, so I did. I didn't want to bother you with it. My fists clenched. What happened then? A week later, I got an email. It said I'd won the lottery, $500,000. I thought it was a miracle. I thought I could pay off the loan and still have enough left over to finally retire comfortably. They said I just needed to pay some taxes on it first, $80,000. So, I took out another loan. Mom, no. I whispered, horror dawning on me. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, I was a fool. There was no lottery, Emma. It was all a scam. Now the bank has taken everything. I owe more than $150,000, including fines and penalties, and I don't have a penny to my name. Anger surged through me, hot and fierce. We'll get to the bottom of this, Mom. Whoever did this to you, we'll find them. Mark and I were shell-shocked. The phone calls, the emails, and the cascading deceit, it was all too much. But we were clear on our next step, we needed to report this. We drove to the local police station, the morning air feeling unusually crisp as if it too sensed the turmoil. At the station, we sat down with Detective Martinez, a no-nonsense type who'd seen more scams than she could count. We explained everything, how my mom was duped into believing she owed a huge loan, how she thought she'd won the lottery, and every detail leading up to her financial ruin. Martinez listened, her expression growing tighter with each word. We'll start by tracing the phone numbers and the email address used in the scam. These guys mess up somewhere, they always do, she said, tapping away at her computer. A few intense days later, Martinez called us in. Her office felt colder than I remembered. We've made a breakthrough, she announced, her voice grim. The account where your mom sent the money, it's registered to a familiar name. Mark and I exchanged puzzled glances. Familiar how? He asked. It's registered under your mother's name, Helen, Martinez revealed, her eyes locked on Mark. The room spun. It couldn't be. But then I remembered my birthday dinner, how Helen had prodded about my mom's finances, her health, her house. It made a chilling sense. Mark slammed his fist on the table. That's impossible. My mother couldn't do this. His voice broke, strained with disbelief and anger. I'm sorry, Mark. I know this is hard, but we've double-checked. She was behind the calls and the emails, Martinez said softly. The betrayal was palpable. Mark was torn, rage and shock battling within him. We need to confront her. We need to hear it from her, he said finally, his voice steel. As we arrived at his parents' house, I noticed a shiny new car in the driveway and my stomach turned. They were living it up while my mom was drowning in despair and debt. We knocked and Helen opened the door, all smiles, acting like we were just there for a casual visit. Mark, Emma, what a surprise. Look at our new car. And next week, we're off on a cruise. Mark's face was like stone. Cut the crap, Mom. We know about the money. It's over. Helen's smile faltered, her eyes darting between us. What money, dear? What are you talking about? Mark stepped into the house, his anger barely contained. The money you stole from Emma's mom. We know everything. At that, Helen's face drained of color. She staggered back, leaning against the wall. Mark, please, you have to understand, we needed. It's too late for excuses. Mark cut her off. His father, Frank, had appeared by then, his expression wary. Frank tried to intervene, his voice shaky. Mark, we're your parents. We're old, prison would destroy us. Please, think about what you're doing. I couldn't hold back. Your age didn't stop you from scamming an old woman out of her home and her peace. Why should we consider your age now? Helen started to sob, her hands trembling. Please, Mark. I'm your mother. Don't do this to us. Mark looked at them, his eyes cold and distant. The police are on their way. You did this to yourselves. The conversation was cut short by the sound of sirens. As the police car pulled up, Frank and Helen's demeanor shifted from pleading to resignation. They knew it was over. Officers entered the house, and after a brief exchange, handcuffed Helen and Frank. They cried, begged for forgiveness as they were let out, but Mark and I just shook our heads. Forgiveness was too much to ask. The courtroom was packed on the day of the sentencing. As the judge declared a 2-year sentence for both Helen and Frank, a murmur swept through the crowd. People who had once respected and known my in-laws were visibly shocked by the extent of their deception. It was a surreal moment to watch them being led away, knowing they had to sell their house to make restitution. After the trial, life slowly started to piece itself back together, but the scars remained. My mom had recovered physically, but she was still mentally shaken. The phone ringing would make her jump, a sad reminder of the trauma she endured. I took legal custody to ensure her well-being, which gave both of us some peace of mind. With the money Helen and Frank were forced to pay, I managed to find a beautiful nursing home for Mom. It wasn't just any facility, but a prestigious one right in our neighborhood. I made sure she had the best care and could maintain some independence within a supportive community. The first time we visited her new home, Mom was hesitant, but as she saw the gardens and the lively social rooms, her eyes lit up. It's lovely, Emma, she said, looking around with a cautious smile. It's the best, Mom. You deserve it. And look, it's just 5 minutes from our place. I'll be here all the time, I reassured her, squeezing her hand. She nodded, her smile growing more confident. I like that. Maybe I can get used to answering the phone again here, with all these nice people around. I laughed, relieved to see her finding comfort. You'll be running the place in no time, Mom. As the days turned into weeks, Mark and I found ourselves settling into a new routine. We were expecting our first child, a beacon of hope after a stormy period. The joy of impending parenthood brought us closer, and I often found myself marveling at how Mark stood by me through everything. His unwavering support was my rock. One quiet evening, as we sat in our living room, Mark wrapped an arm around me. How's your mom today? Settling in still? She's good, getting better at making friends. And she started a little garden project, I replied, resting my head against his shoulder. That's great. She's strong, like her daughter, he said, kissing the top of my head gently. Our lives had changed irrevocably. There was no more contact with Mark's parents, that bridge was burned for good. Yet, in its ashes, we found the strength to rebuild. We focused on the future, our family, and all the love that remained unshaken by the past.